Hello, welcome to the first episode of Local Music Shapes Culture. I'm Alison Christoff, and I'm excited to kick off this podcast and share everything that I have planned in the coming weeks. The focus of this podcast is local music, but primarily DIY music. And if you don't know what DIY music scenes are, it's a specific type of local music scene where it primarily evolves from punk from, the 70s and 80s. And it's a community of people that are organizing to make shows happen, regardless of what anyone at, mid-sized venues thinks is profitable. It's providing a space for punk bands and anyone involved in the DIY local music scene to be able to play shows and showcase their music and their voice. DIY is about music, community, and creating and showcasing their art without waiting for permission from anybody who says that what they're doing is good. So DIY obviously stands for do it yourself. It has an emphasis on independence, community, and passion over profit. DIY shows happen in unconventional venues frequently, like house shows. DIY house shows are very common, in like house shows in basements specifically. Um, and then there are also small local venues that donate their space to hosting these DIY shows. Sometimes we'll play in skate parks and bring a generator to power up our amps and a PA. Really anywhere we can play, we will play. And sometimes we're often pretty creative about how we make this happen. I haven't like I'm not going to say that I've been involved in the DIY scene since I was a teenager because I was not. I was like I even in my college city, I know that there was a DIY scene there in Bloomington, Indiana. Um, but I wasn't involved at the time. I live in Indianapolis right now, and I didn't get involved in the DIY scene until like maybe, I don't know, like maybe like 4-ish years ago. And I primarily started out just attending shows and observing this like very different culture that I was not very familiar with. And I'm someone who experienced a lot of alternative culture prior to that. When I was in Bloomington, I lived in the cooperative housing down there, and there's a lot of alternative people in the Bloomington cooperatives. If you know what co-op houses are, you will understand. But yeah, I wasn't that involved in my local music scene, even though when I was in college, that was the time where I became passionate about music and wanted to pursue music and started picking up guitar and improving my vocal skills. But I was totally unaware until I moved to Indianapolis. Um, so what I love so much about DIY local music scenes is that they are based on like they're based on like providing artists fairness surrounding, compensation for shows. Like when we book shows and we collect the payouts from the door fees, the bands are paid fairly equitably. DIY shows are typically like centered around a local band that's coming into town, and we will usually pay, sorry, they're typically centered around a out of town band that's like either touring or doing a one-off in our city, and they're the headliner, and we typically pay them more just because, travel costs, whatever. And yeah, the venues are not taking a huge cut of the door, if any, sometimes. And everyone that's coming out to these DIY shows knows that they're going to be like raw of off the cuff. No one is like expecting a really polished, rehearsed show. That's not what this is about. If you've only ever attended concerts before, it's nothing like that. There's no choreography. People are often crazy. If you're going to a punk show specifically, a punk show, a hardcore show, like people are doing stupid stuff. I'm avoiding cursing because I don't know what this YouTube algorithm is like, but people are doing stupid stuff at punk shows a lot of the time. People are in the pit, they're moshing, they're like just making a fool of themselves, and it has such a charm to it. Like I love DIY shows. I'm in love with it. That's why I'm making this podcast. Um, yeah, and the audiences love it too. That's why they're coming out. They're true fans. And there's also such a community aspect surrounding DIY shows. Um, like, you go out to shows and you see a lot of the same people. And it's really cool. And they're very low key. You're like, you're watching the bands. There might be a stage, they might be just playing on the floor right in front of you. Either way, you're usually pretty close to the bands, like right next to them. And then when the bands stop at these shows, there's usually like three, four, sometimes five, but I think five is too much most of the time. Um, Too long. But in between sets, there's like time to just kick it with the people there. You can talk to your friends because if you've been going to shows for a while, you probably have friends at these shows. And if not, you should start going so you make friends. But yeah, it's really low key, no pressure. It's very comfortable in that way too. I haven't gone to that many like concerts or big stage, what's it called? Like stadium shows. But I like went to one for the first time in a while recently, and I was like so uncomfortable. I just like wanted to go to somewhere that was like quiet, like they play for so long, there's so many people there, it's so overstimulating, and there's nowhere to take a break. But DIY shows, there is. You can just walk outside, you can go to your car, you can grab a beer from your car and chug it, and then go back. There's really not that many rules. And I really like the vibe of attending a DIY show. And they hold a special place in my heart compared to, a big concert show. I just think they are way better. Yeah, and DIY, I said it's like a specific type of local music scene because I have experienced bands that are not what I would call DIY bands because you will have small local bands that don't feel DIY because they just have this cheesiness to them that feels like it's about their ego and that they're just trying to make it and it's just the way they behave is cliches from music that are don't feel authentic or unique. But this podcast is not about hating on bands. Do what you love, create what you like, and I'm going to stop myself there from talking about other types of local music scenes. Um, yeah, I talked a little bit about like what it's like to attend a DIY show. Yeah, they're pretty intimate. Sometimes there are bigger shows where there will be, 500 people there. Um, at least in my city, I live in Indianapolis. The scene's grown a lot here, but the shows, I don't even know what the count of people attending them typically is, but usually the shows you're attending are not packed houses. Sometimes they are, depending on the lineup, but it's pretty comfortable and what was I talking about? I don't know. But okay, so my favorite types of DIY shows to attend are fast-paced shows, to be frank. I really like hardcore shows for this reason because by nature they are really fast and chaotic and culturally just insane. Or just like any punk band that is a fast-paced punk band. And like I said before, punk bands are just silly and wild. And I love that they are just off the cuff and doing whatever they want in front of the crowd. But DIY isn't just punk. Um, we will have like indie shows, experimental shows, like even ambient shows. I would even consider a lot of those to be DIY. It's so hard to put into words, but it really is just like the vibe of the show. Like just like the purpose of the performers there, the purpose of the people organizing it. It's about like creating a space for people to play music and for an audience to watch them, as opposed to, I feel like ego is the thing that differentiates it. And don't get me wrong, some DIY bands like, I mean, just like any community, some people will have egos. You can sniff it out, but the community as a whole is not about ego. It's about this experience and this community. Um, Yeah, I really love DIY. I think it's a blueprint for a much more equitable culture in general, because of the way that everyone who is taking a part in these DIY shows plays a very equal role in making it happen. We need the audience members to be able to show up and support the bands and pay the bands. We need the people organizing the shows. We need the people running the door, the bands, obviously. And then there's the parts that aren't even directly tied to shows, like the people that are making like art for like the band's merch, the artists that the bands are commissioning to make merch. And there's um and the album art. What else is like the show flyers, the artists that we're commissioning to make show flyers. Like there's so many people involved and they really play an equal part, and um and everyone is valued in an equal way. And I love that about DIY. Let's see. Yeah, so I mentioned before I haven't been a part of DIY forever for my entire life. I'm 28 right now, but I do remember my first DIY show. It was in a basement. TBH, had I don't like see that many basement shows here or house shows here that often anymore. I feel like they used to be more common in Indianapolis. I know in other DIY scenes they're a lot more common, but I haven't seen that many super active house show venues here. I would love to see them. But my first DIY show was a house show. It was a basement show. I remember walking down the stairs while one of the bands was playing. I don't remember which band it was specifically. I just remember walking down. I think I have an inkling of what band it is, but I'm not going to say right now. But I just remember walking down and watching this dude that was fronting this weird hardcore band and just being like, where am I? Do I fit in here? Like, I don't understand where I am or what I'm doing or what this is about. And it was kind of wild, and I don't think it really clicked in me for a minute about like what the whole show experience was about. But I would keep attending shows because I was curious. And now here I am. I fell in love. Let's see. Da, da, da. Yeah, and now I play in bands. I didn't mention that before. I play in two bands. I play bass in Callejera, and then I front this band Pigmale Brains. I just started Pigmale Brains earlier this year. I'm very excited about that band. And Callejera, I joined kind of late in their um in them being a band, like maybe a year and a half after they started. And I love them both very much. Yeah, I love playing. I love performing. It's really a thrill, and I love the audience members that come out to support us. Um, let's see. Yeah, so what da, 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 da. What am I talking about next? I don't know. I feel like I went through most of the things I wanted to talk about. Yeah, what this podcast is going to be about is mostly just like celebrating the awesomeness of DIY music and culture. And I'm going to talk about, my own experiences about in the DIY scene. I really want to do a good amount of interviews about people involved in, especially my local music scene, because it, I mean, they're easy to get to come over to my house and record an interview and just insights into what it's like to be a part of it, what it's like to be a part of a band, what it's like to go to shows, what it's like to just to just be so ingrained in this DIY culture that so many people don't know about. It's like weird. It's like its own little world. Yeah, and yeah, I'm excited for the interviews. I haven't asked anyone yet, but I have some ideas about who I'm gonna ask. And I might go over stuff like what it's like to start a band because I've done it a couple times. Um, it's a careful balance of figuring out what you want the band to be about and who you're asking to be in the band, and I'll get into that at some point. And what it's like to play your first show and just organizing shows and the whole experience. Okay, so DIY isn't just about music, it's about community. And I'm excited to share more throughout the future episodes of this podcast. Um, Be sure to subscribe to hear what we're going to be talking about next week because I'm trying to put out these podcasts on a weekly basis. I'm going to put them out on Sundays at 8 p.m. I just made that up. So I'm committed to it now. So be sure to subscribe and to put it on your calendar to watch these episodes every week, Sunday at 8 p.m. Next week, I really want to do an interview and I need to ask someone. So, hopefully, an interview next week. Otherwise, a different topic. Subscribe. Thank you. Bye.